I wanted to do this one a little bit more of almost a Q&A, because I get a lot of questions about foraging in urban environments, and it's something that people are often concerned about doing. It's something that I do quite a bit and I research quite a bit. So I wanted to be able to speak to that and just have some more perspective on why I actually prefer to harvest in urban environments, talk a little bit about safety concerns, and I also have two plants, one mushroom species that I have videos queued up for to actually be able to identify these things, tell you about how I work with them, how I collect them, how you can find them and identify them safely. And basically we'll run this for about 45 minutes to an hour, kind of depending on how things are going. And just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here. Looks like we got a nice little crew today. I'm doing these every Wednesday pretty much up through April, and we'll perhaps continue them depending on the situation. It's a really cool way to...
Yeah.
All right, here's somebody on the audio. I'm going to mute you. All right, cool. So hopefully everyone understands the format of it. And like I said, I really appreciate interaction. I love when people are asking questions and engaging and often sharing their own experiences with these plants and fungi, and then talking about, do you have any cool recipes? It's always good to know. So I'll open it up to some questions as I am queuing up the first video. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about will address the issues of why forage in urban environments as we go through the videos. So that'll kind of be embedded in the content. And one question is, will this be recorded? I have a work meeting. Yes, this is actually being recorded right now. That's something I should tell you guys. So I put these onto YouTube, usually the day after, hey there. And so they're accessible, so you can go back and look at them. My YouTube is called Healing Ecosystems. If you just type in Healing Ecosystems into your YouTube search bar, you should come up on a lot of my videos. And feel free to subscribe, just getting that YouTube started. And great question. Where am I teaching from? Actually in Berkeley, California as well. So very, very similar bioregions. We have a lot of cool microclimates around the Bay, but Berkeley is pretty ubiquitous across the board. And let me go ahead and put this in there just for people. I'm not sure where everyone's coming from or where you've heard about this. So I always like to include the @Healing Ecosystems on the IG, Instagram, and Healing Ecosystems on Facebook. So feel free to get in touch with me and stay in contact. I love talking plants and mushrooms and all things environmental and otherwise with people. So always great to hear from folks. And yeah, I'll just keep people default muted unless you feel like you want to come on. You can unmute yourself. You're totally free to do that. Okay, cool. So let's jump into it. I think we have all the questions answered for now. And also, once I share my screen, I'm not going to be able to see y'all as well. And I'll have a little flash that comes up if you say something in the chat, and I'll try to click on it as quick as possible so I can get to it. But sometimes I'll miss them, so if I'm not answering you in real time, I'm either getting to the end of a point to where I can have a stopping point and answer you, or I didn't get to the chat, so I'll get to it at least after the video. All right, everybody, cool. So let's jump into it. We're gonna jump into a really interesting plant actually first thing, and going into share screen. So let's share the desktop with y'all. A little bit into my life here. And let's see. All right, I hear some people clicking around out there. I'm gonna try to keep people muted as best I can, but if you see that you're unmuted and you don't mean to be, go ahead and mute yourself just so we don't have a lot of background noise. All right, so everyone should be seeing on the screen a few different videos pulled up, particularly this berry plant right here. So if anyone's not seeing that, shoot me a quick message or say something. But let's go ahead. We're gonna optimize for full screen. And sometimes these videos are choppy, sometimes they're smooth. We'll see how it goes. But I'm just gonna play this video with the volume down and talk to y'all a bit about what we're seeing. And with this one, This is a bit of a controversial plant for me to teach. It's one that someone requested wanting to learn more about last week, so bringing it up this week first thing. And I imagine some people have probably seen this growing around, and it's one that people often will call a poisonous plant and will stay far away from. It has a um, intimidating name, which is the black nightshade. And people often will think that nightshades are poisonous, okay? We're going to dispel a little bit of that and talk about why this plant is actually not poisonous, but we should still exercise caution. So right here on this video, this is actually in Berkeley, in the flats, as opposed to the hills. And this is a really common invasive plant that you're going to see around. It has a wide distribution around the United States, as well as Europe, into Africa, and probably many other places. This particular strain is the Solanum americanum, all right? Also known as the glossy black nightshade or the American nightshade. Now, there's a lot of things to know about this, but if you know that you have Solanum americanum, they are indeed edible. All right, so we're gonna go a little bit over the specs of how to know for sure you have Solanum americanum. And also note that I am using the Latin name really intentionally with this plant. Now, why is that? Because this one in particular shares a common name with a plant that is indeed poisonous that's also in the nightshade family, all right? And that's the Atropa belladonna, which is a really pretty plant, often commonly called Jimson weed as well. But they're very different, easy to distinguish. The Jimson weed, don't touch it. The Atropa belladonna, don't mess with that one. Those berries are very poisonous, as well as the greens of that plant and the flowers, and just not something we want to mess with. This, on the other hand, the black nightshade, the Solanum americanum, I'm using the Latin name because it gets right down to that's the only plant. It describes this plant and this plant only, okay? This is a lot of information, so I'm going to try to go a bit slow through it, but let's see. What I'm showing you guys in the video is the flowers right here. And if you've ever grown tomatoes before, you'll notice that the flowers look pretty similar. Once again, they're in the same family as tomatoes. And what I want you to also notice is that those flowers are coming off, and there's several of them coming off of that one stem. Okay, that's a important marker between the black nightshade here and the Atropa belladonna, which is the one we don't want to mess with, the truly deadly nightshade. People have often confused these plants, and while the Atropa belladonna can kill you dead very easily, this plant has gotten the reputation that is Atropa belladonna while it is not. So what we're seeing here, I'm going to do some pausing as well, is we're seeing the leaf. Okay, looks kind of like a tomato leaf, kind of like a potato leaf. And if we keep going through the video, we're going to see the leaf structures that can be a bit different. One plant can have several different styles of leaf on it. Check out this one, for example. This one, you can see the toothed margins more. Those are, there's just a few teeth on these, so it's not like very finely toothed or anything. But it looks kind of like a tomato plant. And tomatoes can vary a lot in what their leaves look like, but generally has that kind of look to it, can have some purplish to it. There's also Solanum nigrum, which is native to Europe. Looks very, very similar to this plant. Also edible, the fruits anyway. And let's talk a little bit about the fruits. All right, so right here is a beautiful picture of the fruits. You see that real glossy look to it? That's one thing that distinguishes the American black nightshade from the European black nightshade, is that real glossiness. Now, both of these are edible. But what we want to look at is that while this one is edible, those green fruits over there that are right beside it, you don't want to mess with those, all right? This is kind of like Foraging 102, just for you guys to know, like really, if you're unsure about this plant, Make sure you have someone local near you who can tell you more about it and verify the identity, including the scientific name for it, so you know that you have indeed the right nightshade. Because this is a little bit more advanced, but this is an easy one. Pretty much if you see this one growing around, in Berkeley, for example, a very urban environment, if you see it growing like a weed somewhere on a farm, it's going to very often be this American nightshade. If you see it in a landscaping situation, it could very well be a California native nightshade that's perhaps more poisonous than this. So there's a lot of subtlety to this one. And what I was saying is that the green fruits are going to be toxic, okay? Those have a compound in them called solanine, which is actually in all nightshades to varying degrees. Even the tomatoes you buy freshly ripe at the grocery store, or the potatoes that you buy, or the eggplants or the peppers, they contain that solanine compound. But it's in a very low amount and it's not going to hurt you necessarily. Some people are very, very sensitive to it, and some people avoid nightshades altogether. If you're one of those people, you want to definitely avoid this plant. But when you find these purple ripe berries like we see here, when they're nice and glossy, no green streaks, totally purple, almost black, right? Those berries taste like a blueberry mixed with a tomato, okay? They're actually very, very delicious. Now, having said that, I'm not gonna eat handfuls of these. You can kind of taste it. If you taste one, it tastes good, but there's also a little bit of some funk to it almost, where your body's kind of saying, this isn't something I'm going to eat a whole lot of quantity of. But it being such a dark, nice berry like that, we know it's really high in antioxidants. We know it has a lot of nutritional value. And like most plants, cultivated or not, there's a certain amount of toxin in most plants. So that's just something that's a reality of eating food, and you just don't want things in too high a concentration. So even with like potatoes, when I was doing research on this plant in particular, you come across all these instances of people dying from eating potatoes that were actually too far along in their development. So when potatoes get that kind of green skin on them, when they're getting older and been exposed to light, they're actually really high in solanine at that point. So you can, it can be very dangerous for certain people, for most people actually, to even eat potatoes in quantity that are overly ripened like that, or kind of their next phase of reproduction. So just as to say, be cautious with all things that you eat, but the more you know, the more empowering it is. And this is actually a pretty simple one. Got to a few of the identification specs. I'm gonna pause for a second, drink some tea, and see if anyone has any questions that I might have been missing. Didn't see anyone come up on the chat. If anyone had a question on the chat that I didn't see, go ahead and just type hello into the chat so that I see it flash. I know I just delivered a lot of information. It can be a little bit confusing at times, but this is a cool one to know. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. All good. We'll have a chance for more questions in a second. All right, so let's just keep playing the video and see what we can see. Hopefully we'll get a more of a zoomed out picture to see the branching structure of this plant. I think y'all can see my clicker here. So this leaf that's right here, this is actually a mallow leaf. That's a different plant. And once again, what I want to point out about this is that there's several different fruit on that one branch. All right, that's one key identifier. Once again, we're going for very purple, black fruits, okay? Green ones, no go. So in places like Africa, they actually use the greens of these solanum species, and they cook them and they can eat them. I don't recommend doing that. I have not done that yet, but that's a way of rendering the greens actually unpoisonous. But typically the greens, especially raw, are thought to be pretty poisonous. So I would not mess with these greens whatsoever. But you see there's a bunch of fruit on here. This plant can have those white flowers along with the green fruits, along with the purple fruits, all at the same time. So something to think about there. And let's see what else. I saw one question pop up. Could whoever asked that question just go ahead and say hello so that I don't have to unshare the screen and then I can click on it real quick? It just pops up for 1 second where I can see the chat and actually get to it without having to exit out.
Yeah, my name is Chelsea, and I just had a comment saying that I've seen this variety around for years and had been told to stay away from it, but maybe I was seeing the other variety, or maybe people are actually just continuously confused about the difference between the two.
Yeah, great question, comment. Yeah, people are often confused, and when I was first introduced to this plant years ago, I was told that it was deadly poisonous, and I avoided it, um, you know, for months and months before really getting kind of the full story on it. And I was exposed to it as an edible in the book called Foraging California, which is an awesome read if you're in California. And they also have bioregional foraging books that are by the same company, I believe. But yeah, it's often maligned as being poisonous, and that's just kind of the common knowledge. It's probably good in a way, just so that, because you got to learn the subtlety of it to really know how to eat it, how to make sure you're getting a right berry, and then how to distinguish it from the truly poisonous Jimson weed or Atropa belladonna. So it's just something that is often just steeped in misinformation. But I'm glad you said that, because the other thing about it is that some people speculate that it can contain more or less of that solanine toxin that some people are kind of, don't react well to, can actually be poisoned by, depending on where it's growing. So this is true with a lot of different plants, especially wild plants. They can exhibit very different phytochemistry depending on if it's growing in, shade, sun, sand soil, loam, clay, on a farm. It really depends. So those expressions of chemicals are not as reliable. So that's why I say with this thing, even if you go out with someone really experienced and you feel like you 100% have the identification down to the species level and you know that it's edible, then even then I would say, take a little tiny bite of it. Make sure it's going to sit with you. Usually it's recommended to do at least 24 hours of after you've eaten something new, a small amount first. Give it a day. Make sure nothing weird's funky with your stomach. Make sure you're all good. And then you can come back to it and maybe try more. But with this one, it's just something to tread lightly with. Like I said, even as an experienced forager, I've been eating this plant for years. It's never something that I take home like in a big tray, like blueberry style, and then just start, pounding. It's something that I eat very lightly. So, it's a funny line between like poison and not poison, because it's the same chemical that like a tomato would have. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not eating belladonna. Okay. What's next?
All right. Was that a question?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's all good. All right. So, cool. Any last questions about that? I'm going to unshare my screen so I can see everybody. All right. Wonderful. Okay, cool. Got a good bit of people on here. Amazing. Thank you all for coming through. So the other thing that I wanted to mention about the Solanum americanum is often the question that I get about whether to forage in an urban environment or not. Now, if y'all follow my content at all, I'm constantly referencing this one study that was done by Berkeley Food Institute several years ago about wild greens. It's the only study that I've ever found that talks about this. It actually took tissue samples from plants that were around urban environments, the very common invasive edible plants like dock and mallow and oxalis, and they actually did tissue samples to see if those things were uptaking contaminants or to see if those things had pesticides or heavy metals. And what they found is that all that stuff was pretty dang safe to eat. And they did that study in San Francisco. All right. I don't know how many of y'all have ever been to the city, but It's not the cleanest place. There are parts of it that are very nice, but they took this from urban samples, places you would think would be very, very contaminated, and found them to be not only not contaminated, but here's the kicker. They were higher in most all phytochemicals and nutrients than their store-bought counterparts. So it's like very good news for wild edibles. Now, of course, the one caveat of that is use good judgment and use your experience, your eyes, your nose, your senses when you're working with plants, so that you don't just take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Use your judgment too, but have that knowledge in the back of your mind that for the most part, if these things seem okay, they're probably okay. All right, do you have a question, or is that something who's just unmuted? All right, I'm muting people just to make sure I have a bunch of static, but if you have a question, you can totally unmute yourself. I should have it set up to where people are automatically muted. I apologize for not having that setting on. Anyhow, okay, so the second thing I'm going to say about the Solanum americanum before I move on is when it comes to fruiting plants, when you're eating just the fruit, there's a second study. There's actually a few studies that have been done about this particular topic in various places, and they took urban samples of fruit from fruit trees, apples, oranges, stuff like that were growing in urban settings quite frequently. And they did samples on those fruits to see if they were taking up contaminants. Oftentimes, there were contaminated soil around the tree, but the actual fruiting body was totally fine. Once again, it was contaminant-free, and it was not only that, but it was higher in the micronutrients than most all the store-bought fruit. You know this to be true if you've ever picked a really good orange off of a fruit tree around your house and around your neighborhood, and then taken it and compared it to a store-bought orange. It's very hard to compare because the flavor of that wild, quote unquote, fruit is so much higher in all that stuff, and you can taste it. It's often very much more flavorful. So to relate that to this nightshade that we're talking about, when you're eating those fruits, even in an urban place, those fruits are not uptaking those contaminants, theoretically. And if anything, the plant tissue would be the thing uptaking it. But even then, it seems like it's unlikely. So they're fairly safe. Once again, just saying, use your own judgment. But let's see, I got one question over here. So let's jump into that. It says, I'm surrounded by orchards. I know that they use pesticide for the trees. Do you think it would be safe? Yeah, so as far as pesticides on orchard trees, that is not something I have done a ton of research into, so I'm not going to try to speak too much to it, but I will say I imagine a lot of the same applies as far as the inner fruit. And there's like the dirty dozen when it comes to fruits. There's certain ones you want to always get organic, things like strawberries, blueberries, and root crops in particular are things that absorb pesticide a lot more than, say, something like an avocado that has a thick skin, or what else? An orange, perhaps, presuming you're just eating the inside of the orange. So I would use my best judgment, but for the most part, I'm not eating a whole lot of fruit from chemically sprayed orchards myself. Even organic stuff, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, then we're going to get back to it. Even organic stuff sometimes is sprayed with quote unquote organic chemicals. And you'll see people, I've seen it with my own eyes, people in hazmat suits out spraying organic orchards, places like Driscoll's in Santa Cruz that distributes berries around. Not to scare you guys too much, but yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing that these organic certified places are still spraying chemicals where people need to wear hazmat suits to spray them, even though they're certified. So yeah, that's a big topic. I love this though. The Q&A is great. I really appreciate you guys' questions, and hopefully I'm answering some of them. All right. And any other questions before I move on? All right, cool. I'm going to share screen once again. we are going to jump into, oh, and to answer the rest of that question, you guys don't see this question because it was sent to me privately, but it says, what about playgrounds? I'm not exactly sure what you mean there, with the playgrounds. What about playgrounds in terms of pesticides?
Yes, sorry. I mean,
Go ahead.
with the plants, do you think like dandelion greens or, would those be, because, around playgrounds, you're going to have like weeds, maybe in the
Right.
landscapes, but I mean, are those safe?
Right, that's a great question. So dandelion in particular, let's take that as an example. A common plant a lot of us probably know, grows all around the world. So if it's in an environment, basically you're asking if it's in an environment that might have pesticides sprayed in it, is it safe? The answer is yes and no. So if pesticides have been applied to the foliage of that plant recently, you should be able to see that the plant is dying back, and you should be able to see if it's been like very recently, you should see some kind of liquid on the plant that's kind of suspicious. And the plant will start to exhibit signs of being sprayed pretty quickly. So you can tell if you use your senses that something's up with the plant. It's kind of an intuitive knowing. I can often see that a plant's been sprayed before I know that it's been sprayed, just because you can you know what the plant looks like at a baseline level, and then you can see that something's wrong with it. So the other thing that I'll say with something like a dandelion is people are often going for dandelion roots to make like dandelion root tea, which is sometimes called a coffee substitute, air quotes on that, because nothing's really a good substitute for coffee. We all know that. But with the roots, I'd be a little bit more particular about where I harvest them. I have not seen any studies about studying roots in urban environments, but if anything's going to be uptaking chemicals from the ground or pesticides from the ground, it's going to start at the root. That's where it's going to concentrate at typically. So I will, if I'm going to harvest any kind of root vegetable, I'll go to a local farm that I know is organic, or a hillside that I know is not sprayed, and harvest roots from those kind of places. So kind of a long roundabout answer to say with a playground or a place that's been sprayed, it kind of depends. The greens, probably the safest part that you can go for. The seeds are also a more safe part, I would say. And then the fruits are going to be the most safe part. All right. So hopefully that answers some of that question. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen with y'all again. And this is a really common plant. I have a feeling that a lot of you know this plant. But it's just one that I've been using a whole lot lately. I feel like it's very relevant for the pandemic times that we're in. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful specimen that we have here. So I'll turn the volume down so I'll just narrate in real time with you. All right, anyone know what this one is? Just off the top, if anyone wants to put it into the chat. It's a very fragrant plant. And what I'm doing right here is I'm spinning the stem around. So if you know a little bit about botany, you will know that the stem is square right here. And the square stem, more often than not, means that you have something that is in the mint family, right? Lamiaceae. So not everything that has a square stem is necessarily a mint, but most things with a square stem are a mint. And what I'm also showing you here, I don't think I've said the name of this one yet, have I? I'll hold off for a second. Look at the opposite leaves. Yep, you see how those leaves the petioles are situated straight across from one another? And then there's some little baby leaves emerging from those leaf axils as well. But that's called opposite leaves when they're arranged like that. And then they have that kind of like crisscross that they do going up to the top. And this plant is called lemon balm. All right, Melissa officinalis. Pretty common plant out here. It's a common garden herb. It's a perennial, so it grows back year after year. This is really a beautiful shot of this plant. I really like it. I wish I had the smell-o-vision for you guys so you could smell it. What I'm basically showing you here is that the smell is probably the #1 indicator as far as identifying it as a mint, like I was just talking about. I'll pause right here. That's one way, looking at those opposite leaves. And then also look at the top of the leaves. So those have toothed margins. See that? Those teeth, they're kind of pointing up towards the top of the leaf there, towards that point. Another way to identify it. But really, if you rub it, if you agitate it a little bit in your fingers and smell your fingers, or smell the leaf, it's going to smell like lemon, right? Kind of this balmy, like a green lemon smell. It's very, very pleasant for most people. And the cool thing about lemon balm is it is proven to be a really potent mood regulator, as well as, this is something I just learned about, it is actually great for enhancing cognitive function. So I was doing some performance enhancement by drinking some lemon balm tea right before this. And it has been proven in these scientific studies to enhance performance in like math and all these other cognitive functions, and has been known for a long time to help with anxiety. So people have traditionally used this to soothe the system, to calm down the nervous system, to relax, and to just soothe the mood in general. People were doing this at least 2,000 years ago, if not longer. And science has just caught up with that in the past few decades and actually done the studies to show that it does indeed do that. So it contains something called rosmarinic acid, which is also present in many different mints, and it's very present in rosemary too. And yeah, I mean, it's a really potent, almost like a nootropic in a way, something that helps brain function. And the other thing about lemon balm, and this is why it's especially relevant for now, the anxiety regulation for one. I mean, I think we all experience anxiety at different times, and being cooped up indoors doesn't help with that, that's for sure. But it's also an antiviral, okay? So this is something that I'm taking and putting into tea on a daily basis, pretty much. I'm gonna keep playing the video as I talk. And hopefully that video is coming through clear for y'all. Sometimes these videos are a little choppy, so I apologize if that's the case for you. But what I wanted to just show you is how it grows in these clumps like that. That's another characteristic. Now I'm walking down the street because I want to show you a different lemon balm patch that's more weeded. In my neighborhood, I can identify 5, 6 different lemon balms, 3 of which are in my backyard, that are just growing rogue, totally volunteers. I've tried to grow this plant from seed a few times and got like no germination. So I have just given it to the wild to produce this plant for me. And I think, let's see, what I was wanting to show here is that sort of how you harvest it. Like I'll often just pinch off the tops, so those first few leaves right there. When I find a good clump like this, I'll pinch them off and just leave some bottom leaves to photosynthesize still. And I don't think it hurts the plant whatsoever. I think the plant actually kind of uses it. What was that?
Starling, which sounds like it's right over there. And
is someone asking a question, or is that an accident? I'm guessing someone's just unmuted on accident. Anyways, I don't have access to mute people right now. So if you do have a question, that was a question and I'm misinterpreting that, please hit it in the chat. Let's see. And thanks for dealing with the technical stuff of all this. Being online is often a little tricky, but I think we're getting it down. So, all right, what I want to show here, like I was saying, is I pull off the tops to harvest, to take home and make into tea. And then sometimes I'll just actually pull leaves. So I'll just pull a few leaves from several different plants. And that's a little bit less obtrusive. But using like a nice pair of pruning shears, I feel like is a good move. Excuse that. Using a nice pair of pruning shears is good if you're going to like cut the tops off. Even cutting the leaves, I like to cut them all the way at the back of the petiole, which is that leaf stem. I'll cut off the entire petiole. It just seems to leave the plant looking a little nicer. And then I'll take that home and I'll often dry it. You can dry it next to a window. You don't want to dry herbs in bright sunlight because it starts to degrade a lot of the medicinal properties. But you can dry it somewhere that's obviously dry, away from light, with some circulating air, and this kind of thing will dry very easily. But I'll sometimes put in the dehydrator on low too and just get it dehydrated quick. And just have it on deck to put into teas, basically. People do cook with this as well. Can't say that I have, but I imagine it's an amazing flavor. So it's a little bit about lemon balm. Get a last little look at it, and if anyone has questions about it, it's a very common, easy edible. That also crosses into that medicinal realm as well very nicely. So yeah, usually I'm just steeping it into tea, and then apparently the cognitive enhancement effects occur about 1 hour after ingestion is what they say in the science studies. I just think it's so cool that, you know, people have the ability to know what these plants do without having to have ever done a study on it other than just sort of communing with the plants. That always interests me. All right, so yeah, okay, cool. There were people chatting. I didn't see the chat. I'm so sorry. Sometimes it doesn't show it to me for whatever reason. Cool. Somebody's gonna be right back. All right, lemon balm. Yep, y'all knew it. I figured somebody had to have known it. I was curious. I didn't see any answers. Mint. Yeah, it's a mint for sure. But yeah, all good. Cool. So some of y'all knew that plant. Yeah. Any questions about lemon balm? I guess what I'll say about it is one thing that you notice here is that I'm on the street when I'm harvesting this. I harvest from these two plants with some frequency, and this is in between the sidewalk and the street. All right, and I live on like a kind of busy street. It's not that busy, but it's a place where, you know, I know the terrain and I walk the neighborhood enough to know that people aren't spraying chemicals, and to know that things are kind of taken care of. Now, the thing is that this is going to have pollutants from the air on it, from, you know, car exhaust, etc. There's no doubt about that. So when I get it home, I give it a really good washing. All right. But as far as having contaminants in its structure, in its leaves and its stems and all that, I just don't think it's the case based on that BFI study. And then also just from interacting with it, you can tell they're very healthy plants. You see how verdant those are right now. So I feel like it's a you know, it's okay to harvest from urban places, but use judgment and make sure it's places that you're kind of in relationship with. That definitely helps. So there's a lot of medicine grown out in our front yards and backyards, that's for sure. All right, so any more questions on lemon balm? Definitely a fairly easy one to find. Sometimes I'll see it next to creeks, riparian areas. It likes to grow there, and it's a very gentle plant. I would not consider it to be very invasive. Like a lot of the mints can be extremely aggressive, as many of you know, take over entire yards. But lemon balm's pretty well behaved, and it dies back kind of in the fall time around here at least, and then it starts to come back around right now. A few weeks ago is when I first started seeing the ones in my backyard pop back up. So it's a very gentle perennial plant. Also very good on the digestive system, very gentle on the stomach. A lot of times anxiety is carried in people's stomachs, so it makes sense that it helps to kind of move things along gently in the stomach and help the stomach lining, and then also has those anti-anxiety properties. So very cool plant. I like to put it into teas with like rosemary as well to kind of enhance those effects, along with some sages, which are also in the mint family. Wait, are sages in the mint family? I think I might be incorrect actually. Anyway, I'll have to look that back up. So let's see, there's one more. Actually, this isn't a plant that I wanted to get into. Something a little bit different. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions. So a good bit of people logged on, wonderful. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna jump into one last video. All right, so this is a video I actually took in, I think it was the fall of this past year. So the climate's quite different. Y'all see how dry it is out here? It's like bunch of kindling laying around basically. This is what California looks like when it hasn't rained in 6-7 months. But what I wanted to show in this video, so we have a mushroom here. Yeah, so this is a mushroom. This is a polypore mushroom. So you see, let's back this up a little bit. I'm gonna slow this whole situation down. All right, so it's growing out of the base of a cut tree. It looks like some kind of pine tree to me, probably a Monterey pine. But this particular mushroom, this is one I bet y'all have heard of. I want to make sure people know how to identify it because it can be confused with several other mushrooms. But it grows out of, various different kinds of woods, pretty resilient, pretty hardy, found across lots of places in this country and beyond. And yeah, it's just growing out of the trunk right there, starting to decompose that wood. And this is a really small specimen because it's growing in really dry conditions and it's towards the end of its season. But what you're gonna see here is, check out those, all right. Hopefully the screen's kind of clear for you guys to be able to see what this is. But those little pores right there are the telltale sign that you have a turkey tail, okay? That's where it distributes its spores from. Now, there are at least, I would say, 3 other species that grow out here that resemble a turkey tail on the top, very, very similarly. But the turkey tail is the only one that's going to have those really tiny little holes in it like that. So they're almost like little pinpricks. Kind of hard to see with the naked eye for some people. But the other one, which is often called the false turkey tail, will have a really smooth underside. All right, that one is Styrium hirsuta, or false turkey tail. Let's see if we can get to the top of the turkey tail. We can get a little video on the top so I can point to that. But this is, like I said, a really tiny specimen. So it's not the best to demo with, but it's what we're working with. And yeah, what I'm showing you right here is the top of it, when it's in good condition, is gonna look a lot like a turkey's tail, all right? And I'm pointing to the outer edge. The outer edge of turkey tail is gonna quite often be white, okay? With mushrooms, you wanna make sure you have multiple identifiers, so you're not just saying the top of that edge is white, but yeah, I'm showing where the habitat is right here. So you can see what it's growing off of. But it's gonna often have a little white ring around the top, and it has these kind of striations around the top that are multiple colors. So the Latin name for turkey tail is Trametis versicolor, all right? Versicolor meaning it can come in various colors. So they can be red, they can be pink, they can be purplish, bluish. They can vary quite a bit. So you want to be able to identify them by flipping them over, looking at the bottom, and seeing those pores, all right? The other 2 to look out for would be one that's called Trametis betulina, and it looks just like turkey tail on the top, but when you flip it over on the bottom, it has gills, all right? So hopefully most of you are familiar with what gills are on a mushroom, but they're the sporulating structure that's underneath the cap that's, running like this. Hopefully y'all can see my hands. But actually I have a turkey tail in my pocket that I pulled out of my backyard. This is actually a better representation of it. Let me know if y'all can see that, if people are actually looking at the screen. The light's not super hot in here. But that's more what it looks like. There's a good representation of it. And then right here, sometimes they can be kind of pinkish on the bottom too, rather than white, depending on what they're growing on. But they're gonna have that pore no matter what. And then there's also violet tooth polypore. I actually haven't seen that one out here, but it's one that occurs on the East Coast. And it kind of has this violet-y color to it. The underside is a little bit purplish. And it's going to have more like teeth, all right? So these raised bumps. That one's the only one I can imagine would be kind of easy to maybe confuse, but once you know a turkey tail, it's pretty easy to identify them just by those pores, by seeing that surface. So fairly easy one. people are often really freaked out by IDing mushrooms. This is such an easy one to do, because those lookalikes are not poisonous lookalikes, and some of those actually have medicinal properties. They're just not studied that well. But with turkey tails, they're not technically edibles either, okay? As you probably know if you've ever interacted with one or just from looking at it, they're really, really hard, all right? That's another characteristic, is they're kind of like meaty. They're you know, buff, or not buff, that's not a good term for it, but they're thick. They have a thickness to them, a hardness. So you're not going to be able to eat these, like fry them up, but traditionally people would break them up and put them into soup broths, and that hot water running over them for a good while will bring out some medicinal qualities. That's most often how I use it. Is I'll break it up, put it into a pot of simmering water for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then drink that tea. I'll strain out the mushroom bits and then drink the tea. And you know, turkey tail is known for having anti-cancer properties, for helping your body to produce natural killer cells that can then go after cancer cells. Not to say that this is a one-stop bullet for curing cancer, but it has been shown time and time again that in conjunction with typical chemotherapy techniques and whatnot, this is boosting people's outcome of having a better health outcome by like tremendous amounts. So it's something really cool to consider. All right, it's not something doctors necessarily know about, so just give you some perspective. And then there's another way of actually doing alcohol extracts. If you want to get the entire constituent of all the different medicinal components of this, you want to do an alcohol extract as well as that water extract, and then combine those two, and that's the maximum amount of medicine you'll get from a turkey tail, basically. So that's a bunch of information, and hopefully that helps some people. Turkey tails are one that you're going to see quite often. You'll see it in urban settings sometimes. Looping back to the conversation about toxicity and whatnot, mushrooms are one that will take up toxins more readily than other things. They'll often concentrate toxins in the fruiting bodies. So it depends on the species. Certain ones do it more than others. I'm not 100% sure about turkey tail, but it's one that's so common out in the forest that I would just source it from the forest or grow it yourself, rather than using it from an urban environment if you can avoid it. But yeah, just to reiterate, mushrooms in an urban environment are a little bit more questionable. Even though I sometimes will find mushrooms in urban environments and eat them. It's like landscape morel season right now. All right, got a question here. So the main difference IDing is that turkey tail has pores on the underside and the false turkey tail has ridges on the underside. Is false turkey tail medicinal at all? All right, great questions in there. So first of all, yes, the pores on the underside are the main indicator. The false turkey tail does not have ridges. Sorry if I was unclear about that. The false turkey tail is actually smooth to the touch on the underside. So if you ran your finger along the bottom, you won't necessarily be able to feel the pores of the turkey tail, but you'll be able to see them. But the false turkey tail is going to most often be orange and like reddish burnt color. And it's going to have a very distinct smoothness to the bottom. And I believe that one does have some medicinal properties to it. What they are, I don't remember, but I have researched it before and seen that it does have some. It doesn't have a whole lot of scientific backing on it yet, though. So, like I said, it's not one that's going to poison you, but it's also not the ideal. You can go out and find turkey tail pretty easily. And then the other part of that question is it's false turkey tail medicinal. I answered that. The one that I was talking about it doesn't have ridges, but it has gills. That one is the Trametis betulina. I'll actually pull up something on the screen real quick. Yeah, thanks for jumping on. It's great to have so many people in here. Thank you all for being here. And once again, this is recorded, so you guys can check it back out on YouTube. I'm just going to mute people. I think I can hear someone's clicking in the background. Maybe not. All right. Yeah, let me show y'all a quick post, and I'll do some promotion of my Instagram as well. I'm going to share screen again. All right. And if anyone has questions, feel free to jump in. We're kind of getting towards wrapping up time. So anything you have heard has inspired you, that's always great. And yeah, love to hear questions, love to hear feedback. So, all right, on the screen right now, you should see this picture of these three different polypore mushrooms. And this is on my Instagram from a few months ago. I was in Asheville, North Carolina. And we had the Tremendous versicolor, the turkey tail right here. We had the violet tooth polypore, Tricoptum biform right here. And then we had the false turkey tail, Sterium. Oh, this is Sterium ostrea. Okay. There's also Sterium hirsuta. Yeah, there's even more than I mentioned as far as like turkey tail lookalikes. But it's a pretty safe one as far as the lookalikes go, like I said. And I'm going to scroll through. And this, if you could see it well, you probably can't see it that well, is the bottoms. This bottom one that I'm circling around with my clicker, that's the false. That's the violet tooth polypore right here that I'm circling. And then this is the actual turkey tail. All right, and if you could look up close to that one, zoom in, you'll see little pores on that one. You'll see the teeth on that one. And you would see the smoothness on the false turkey tail or the Sterium. All right. Oh, and this is my Instagram. Feel free to follow me if you want more information like this. It's at Healing Ecosystems. I'm pretty good about answering DMs and whatnot. So if you have a question for me or want to clear up anything about what we talked about today or other times, I'm more than happy to talk to people. And let's see, I'll share one more thing, then I'll take a few more questions. Let's see, this is not the right Eventbrite, but let's see if I can share this. All right, yeah, this is a class I got coming up, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. This is an acorn processing basics class. This is gonna be a 3-hour class. So this is for people who are more involved and interested in really getting down with some more advanced foraging. And acorns are an amazing source of sustenance, and the flour is starting to get scarce around here, I think, in some of the grocery stores. So knowing how to process acorns is a pretty cool skill to have in general at all times, because pretty much all of our ancestors ate acorns. So if you want to grab a ticket to that, that's the Eventbrite right there. I'll post the link in our chat as well. But that would be a really cool class. I'm excited for that. It's going to be, once again, an offering like this of video as well as live stuff, but it's going to be pretty in-depth. So feel free to hop on that. If you're in the Berkeley area and you want to pick up some acorns from me to actually follow along in the class, we'll be offering some of those too for a little bit extra. And if price is an issue with any of these, I know a lot of us are, working with a kind of a new economic model that's going on right now. So if price is an issue for people, feel free to direct message me and we can definitely work something out. So I want to get this knowledge out there to people who want it. And with that, we got a few minutes for questions. We got a pretty good bit of people on the call right now. So feel free to jump on, questions, feedback. Sure, so we have a question here. It says, I have a question about growing morels, if you'd be open to answering a question like that. You can ask it. If I have an answer for it, I'll be surprised, but go right ahead.
Okay, so I have some morel spawn, and I read that morel grow in areas where there were forest fires, and then if you wanted to grow your own morels, you would need to basically amend the soil with wood ash to mimic that atmosphere. Do you have any experience growing morels or any other tips? Because I'm just working on preparing the mushroom bed.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I can tell you a little bit about my experience with morels in general. I have not tried to grow them. I know that they are notoriously difficult to grow on purpose, but some people do have success with them. I've seen where people made like slurries of morels and spread them about and had a lot of fruiting happen. And I'm just kind of speaking from other people's knowledge right here. So you might become more expert at this pretty quickly by actually doing it. But I'm guessing what you have are probably landscape morels. And I don't know the Latin off the top of my head. Cool. Morel spore pack. That's amazing. It doesn't have the Latin on there. That would be helpful. But basically, all I know is that they're probably landscape morels. And let's see. The thing with those is that they often, I know, grow in like apple orchards, old apple orchards. As far as wood ash and all that, I don't know. I don't really know. Typically, morels that are growing out in the wild will grow in really disturbed areas, places that have been logged recently or have had a forest fire recently. So I'm not sure if the landscape morels need that same condition of having the ash, but it seems like that may help them out. There's probably different pHs and whatnot that they need. That's cool. Though. Definitely report back to us on how that goes. And we have an event coming up on Sunday. So follow my social media. I'll be posting about this hopefully later today or the next day. And that's going to be a class that goes more into plants as allies as well as mushrooms. And I definitely teach about mushrooms to a degree, but I have a partner who's helping me with that class who is more of the mushroom cultivation and just myco expert. So that would be maybe a cool class to get in on and hear some perspectives on that kind of thing. So follow the social media on that, and definitely let us know how that goes, because that'll be really cool if you can get somewhere else to go.
Cool. Thanks for your feedback.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. And let's see another question here, which is lemon balm good at keeping mosquitoes at bay? I cannot say that I've ever tried it like that. Does anyone have experience with that? For some reason, I feel like I have read that before, but I can't say that I've used it. All right, and I'm copying. Oh, I'm trying to send a message to everybody. Yeah, it has citronella spelling on it. Yeah, I'm not sure. That'd be something cool to look up. A lot of volatile oils. Yeah, I feel like I have heard such a thing before. You know, we are so lucky in a certain way where I live in Berkeley to not really have a lot of mosquitoes, but I definitely grew up with mosquitoes in Alabama. So that would be something cool to know. Something good to look up. All right. Yeah, someone said it works similar to citronella, which is also a plant you can grow. Very cool. Yeah, that's good. It's good to kind of crowdsource the information. I don't have all the answers, but someone out there probably does. Would also love to read the study on plant uptake if you can send that along. Absolutely. Let's find that study. I sometimes have it up. Basically, we're gonna look up Berkeley Food Institute wild edible study, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating to read about. And the thing that they say on that too, which is important, is that they studied a certain sample size and got really good results, but you know, they still need to do more. But they were doing it in soils that were definitely contaminated, so it's promising, but it's not a end-all be-all prescription. Nothing really is. But there's the study for everybody. Let's see, cool. So we're edging up on 2:30 right now. If anybody has any last questions or comments, feel free to drop a line or jump on the screen. And if not, I will start saying bye to everybody. And once again, doing this every Wednesday. So got new plants, new fungi coming up. If you have any requests of things that you want to hear about or any aspects of foraging that you want to hear about, feel free to shoot a message or say something in the chat right now. We could bookmark it for next week. And other than that, I'm going to get back to my lemon balm tea, and hope you guys have a lovely day and get out there and like engage with some plants. I know it's a really, really, you know, it can be kind of tough out there to be outdoors right now for some people. So definitely be safe. But if you can get in your backyard or, you know, work with a house plant, just do something. Like having some soil in your life is pretty important. All right. And so a couple of things someone asked, is there a link for Sunday's class? Not yet. We're still working on getting it up. We're going to have a link for this Sunday, and then we're going to also do two classes in March, it looks, or not March, in May. So keep an eye out for those. I'll put that on my social media. So once again, follow the Healing Ecosystems page on Instagram or Facebook. And then I also have the website, healingecosystems.com, for anyone who doesn't have those social media outlets. This one asks, can we discuss collecting for propagation? And I'm guessing you're talking about mushrooms in that regard. But not sure. But yeah, we could totally, you know, I can't really go into collecting mushrooms and how to cultivate those from the wild. That's a pretty involved process. My friend Taylor can probably go into that a little bit more in that class on Sunday. So look out for that. Okay, you're asking about cultivating edible plants. That's a great question. I'm sorry I left that out. That's definitely a big part of the conversation anytime that it comes to edibles. So yeah, I could definitely bookmark that and put that into our next week's talk. And we could go into that. It's a huge aspect of it because there's like invasive plants that you might not want to cultivate, and then there's native plants that you could be collecting and cultivating. So it's an involved topic, definitely something good for a future talk. And once again, this will be on, this will go onto YouTube pretty quickly, so you can review it if you want, send it to people. And if you don't catch the one next week, or you missed, you know, last 2 weeks, you can definitely check those out on YouTube as well. Yeah, elderberry cuttings are pretty tough. I'll say that I've failed at those a couple times myself, but failure is a great teacher. So I know people who have done it very successfully. All right, cool, y'all. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I super appreciate the attention and the correspondence and the back and forth, and hopefully y'all learned something. And yeah, really grateful for everybody out there. So I'm gonna sign off, stop the recording. Happy harvesting, everybody. Adios. All right.
Hello, can you hear me?